Hey everybody, Rich coming to you here with Leaving MAGA at the MeidasTouch network at leavingmaga.org. I hope all you guys had a great Christmas, getting ready for the new year. Leaving MAGA has never been busier, and one of those reasons are these videos that we're producing with the MeidasTouch network team. So thank you so much for watching. Got a testimonial today for you that's a bit of a twofer. If you've been watching our videos, you've seen that we feature those who courageously left MAGA, but also friends and family of those who are still in the thrall of MAGA. So today I've got someone who not only left, but is now trying to work to get her family out of MAGA. So I want to bring in here Tora Owen. Tora, first of all, thank you for being with us. You reached out to us after I put on my socials, like always. Hey, if you're looking to tell your story, we want to hear from you here at the MeidasTouch Network. So you and your family gravitated to the MAGA community in the movement. So this was really a family affair for you. So talk to us about that. What was it about MAGA that really appealed to you and your family? What year was it? What were some of the traits of it that you felt like, yes, you wanted to be aligned with this?
So I personally, my parents have always been more right-leaning, and it's been a thing since I was, pretty young, and I personally, growing up, felt that my parents tended to say things like, you should do your own research and look things up. And I personally, that made sense to me at such a young age. And I thought it was honorable. And, they're my parents and I'm young. And so I grew up thinking that, there were immigrants stealing jobs and such. And as far as I can remember, it's kind of been a big family issue and one of the main talking points my family had as a group that we could all sit together and discuss. And another thing is I was diagnosed autistic when I was only 3 years old. My mom took this and blamed herself for me being diagnosed autistic. And my mom, who was, you know, asking herself, how could this happen, ended up on the answer that it was vaccines. And that ends up, becoming a pipeline of right wing and conspiracy things because honestly, I don't really know how these days, but it kind of has happened. And I think that was one of the biggest things was that my mom had a rough childhood and a very a very insecure sort of lifestyle. She was a trailer kid. And my dad, you know, grew up in a relatively normal home, just a lot of children. So that was sort of the natural path to be Republican. And, you know, I I'm sure my parents were probably got into MAGA a lot earlier than I remember because, I was still kind of young back then, but I distinctly remember it really picking off 2016. And I think that was probably because that was, if I remember correctly, one of Trump's first real rallies. I could be wrong on that. I don't have great memory. But eventually, my parents gravitated towards this man who, not just was he Republican, but my parents also saw him as a great businessman. And that there were issues with this country he was going to fix. And, young me believed this too, because not only are they your parents, it sounds idealistic. It sounds, like this is what's meant to happen. This is just the normal sort of discourse that happens in the political spectrum. And as somebody who always seemed to have an interest in it, I thought, oh, this is just normal. When I started to realize that something was off, was around the time I began to realize that I was probably around the LGBTQ community as being a non-binary person. And that's when things, I think, really escalated.
Thank you for sharing that. And I hear a lot of the misinformation, disinformation, a lot of the mythology of what MAGA came to be and what Trump was as a candidate, and coming in as this person who's the sole messiah for our ills. That was in 15 and 16. Fast forward to 24 now, it's identical, right? It's identical, because what was said at the rallies this time around, only I can fix it. And for those out there who are watching, who are in the MAGA community, I'm not saying this as an I told you so, but what they're going to discover is that he's not going to fix anything for them. But that's an opportunity for us to provide the exit and off ramp for those who are in MAGA and give them a chance to leave. So do you think that some of you mentioned your mother, do you think that some of her disadvantaged upbringing may have been a bit of a gateway for her to MAGA, and then bringing in the entire family at that point?
Absolutely, I do think so. My mom has told me before she has a lot of mental health issues. She just doesn't really like to talk about it. And, it's a lot easier to blame some boogeyman than to say, hey, there might be some issues I have eternally that I need to work on. And it's something I think that my entire family struggles with, including myself, is that we're all prone to point fingers at things that go tumble in the night that aren't truly there, and point at some concept as if it's the manifestation of all our ills, and that if we get rid of it, we can just solve it. Because I was my mom's first child, and then my brother came along, and then that was it. So can't imagine what it would have been like for my mom to have had her first child, being told autistic. And I still remember vividly that my mom told me that the doctor said that I wasn't going to make it, which is pretty horrific, especially considering that this was only like 20 years ago, and it's pretty much kind of the same thing they said like 50 years ago. And that probably had a big impact on my mom from like a doctor.
Well, we're glad the doctor was wrong, and thank you for being candid on that, because I think it is just a trait of our nature to look to assign blame to others if something is not going well in our own lives. So take me into your world when you and your family, this is after the 2016 election. What are your conversations like with your family when you're a true believer, devoted MAGA American? And I always use the term MAGA American to be inclusive, as opposed to MAGA Republican or Democrat. I keep it nonpartisan. What were those? Tell me what was it like? What was life like for you with your family when you guys are very deep in your allegiance to MAGA?
So it can be a bit hard to explain. And sometimes I've said to people, it's a bit like a cult, and that's not a term I like to use lightly, but I will say that there are certain aspects of it living like that were definitely very cultish. But I wouldn't say it's a full-blown cult. I just think it's kind of cult personality. So a lot of it was me and my family, we'd casually be eating dinner. Oh my God. And we'd, somebody would bring up a topic, and we'd all start chatting about it, and we'd all just start basically dissing it and being like, haha, look at these silly Democrats, they're so stupid. That is what I remember a good portion of the conversation being, was these people are so dumb. They think that somehow criminals will obey the law. That was a very common thing that I remember back in that time. Was my parents like to preach this thing that about gun control, that criminals are just going to find the guns anyways, which I guess in some ways is true, but I don't think they realize that less guns overall means less access to guns overall. And there was also the part of when it came to LGBTQ plus issues, because, well, at the time I hadn't realized it. I definitely had been feeling the fact that I was not necessarily fully aligned with my body. I'm not, well, I guess it depends on who you ask, but I consider myself an NB, non-binary. Some people say that's trans. It depends on your definition of that. But I never felt solely like a girl. And so I always felt this sort of disconnect whenever my parents would talk about, they think that girls can become boys or something along those natures, because the concepts of girl and boy never really aligned with me. And that was another thing that was pretty common back in that time. And that was, I think, one of the biggest clues I had that something wasn't quite right.
I'm just, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about the fact that I had probably identical conversations, and I could have fully ensconced myself in all of your familial discussions about all of these topics, because I engaged in them myself on a day-to-day basis, hour by hour by hour. And it's not an exaggeration to say that. And I think it warrants something you said that warrants some credit, excuse me, I'd like to give you, about how it doesn't help to refer to MAGA as a cult. Do I agree that there are some cult-like aspects to it? Yes, for me, I never took an hour off from it. So I can very much relate to that, but I appreciate your nuanced take on that, because we want to extract people out of MAGA, and calling them cultists is just going to strengthen the already strong bond that they have with Trump and with the MAGA movement and that community. So you're alluding to where there may have been some chinks in the armor. So what were some of the events? When did they occur? What were they, where some of your doubts about supporting Trump and MAGA commenced?
So to get into that, I, of course, being autistic, I never really grew up with many friends. My first real friend that I had in school eventually ended up moving away. So I ended up spending a good lot of my time on the internet. And this is one of the reasons why I think, parents fully taking away internet from kids or trying to ban social media is bad as a whole thing, because the internet managed to give me access to, a whole side of the world I'd never seen before, because it just wasn't talked about and was demonized. And I don't fully remember, but I remember that these concepts of girl and boy weren't really making much sense to me. And I looked a lot of it up and kind of started to understand that, oh, okay, my parents might be wrong about some things. That happens. And so I tried to explain to my parents that, transgender actually, the whole people being transgender actually has valid scientific basing. Um, for example, they found some changes in the brain chemistry, and my parents would always stick to this sort of the same thing of, well, you have XX chromosomes, so you're a girl. And what didn't help is a few years later, I was diagnosed with PCOS, which basically means that my body produces more testosterone than a normal female body should, which therefore makes me semi-intersex, which means that from the very beginning, I was not fully in that line. Which, even if even when I learned that, I tried to make my parents understand that these gender confines don't really apply to me as much as they do to others, because my body, was born differently. Another thing, hold on, I'm trying to think. Sometimes I have lapses. Another thing was I took a lot of my time alone writing, and a lot of it was fan fiction because, I was a teen back then, and I still do it to this day, but because I think it's a fun exercise. But I met somebody, and they introduced me to a bunch of friends, and it was from them that I had met my first real person that was on the other political spectrum of where I was used to. Because although the state I live in, Minnesota, is a blue state, Minnesota is very weird in the sense that you're going to find the middle of Minnesota is blue, but the rest of it is like pretty red because it's more country. So, I was talking with this friend and some of his friends, and I distinctly remember saying to somebody that I'm transphobic, and they said, "Wait, you're transphobic?" And I said, "I just don't understand trans people." And they said to me, "Well, that's not being transphobic. That's just being, not fully understanding." I think that may have been one of the moments that something clicked for me, that, oh, something isn't quite right here.
Do you feel like, or maybe I should say in the past tense also, and not just the present, do you feel like a lot of the beliefs that pervade the MAGA community are hostile to you as an individual? Are there times that you feel like they're an attack on you, on who you are as a person? Because you had the moment, all of us who leave, we have individual moments that contribute to our eventual epiphany. And to paraphrase the American writer Ernest Hemingway, my epiphany, and I've discovered with pretty much everyone I meet who leaves MAGA, is the epiphany happened gradually and then suddenly all at once. What was the moment for you where you said, "I'm out"? Do you remember what it was? Do you remember approximately when it was where you said it was the culmination of everything that you'd been thinking about, questioning your beliefs, and you said, "Okay, this is it. I'm leaving"?
Yes, I don't fully remember what specific year it was because, again, I have some memory issues and something I've been trying to look into. But I distinctly remember coming to the realization that, oh, I'm non-binary, and that, oh, my parents probably aren't going to support me, and, no matter what I do, I probably can't change their minds on that. And so I remember going to bed and crying alone because there was no one. I couldn't tell my parents what I was feeling because they wouldn't understand what it's like to have what you originally believed in flipped on its head, because you realize that what you personally realize is now you is something that these people seem so against, and you can't understand why, and you feel that it should be obvious, but for them it's not. And I don't know if there's truly any term out there to describe when you know something and you think it should be obvious that others can see it, but they can't. That was, I think, the biggest moment for me was when I realized that specific thing was going on.
So what is your relationship like now with your family? Do you speak politics? Are you trying with maybe some subterfuge to try to get them to start questioning a little bit their beliefs? What's that dynamic like right now with your family?
So, there have definitely been moments that have, like I personally, when, all the vaccine talk about being, um, you know, anti-vaccine and all these horrible things they could do to you, um, kind of made me afraid of needles a bit. So I have personally many times said that I don't want to hear, this talk while I'm being picked up from school. And so I would just say, can we please not talk about this? And sometimes, they would oblige. Other times, they would give me some weird looks. But one of the things is that I told my parents that I don't want them to come, you know, really talk to me about politics. And that has been something of a big disconnect, because me and my parents don't think the same things are political. For example, I don't think most LGBTQ plus stuff is political, and I don't feel that. Um, I'm sure you heard about the furry group hacking a major Republican think tank. I didn't feel that was necessarily political. It was just really funny to me. Um, my mom took that as political, which I guess I can understand. Um, as in terms for subterfuge, I think one of the most impactful things so far is, I don't know if you've talked about it before on your channel, but there was an article published by one of Trump's uncles who has a disabled son. And so Trump uncle, goes to Trump and he's like, hey, we've been trying to help for these disability aids. And in that article, Trump uncle states that Trump said that people like that should just die. And that was, I think, the first time I have received an email from my mom, which is usually how I communicate while I'm, busy doing other stuff. That she was like, I'm not surprised he said that. It wasn't, defensive. It was just her admitting that, oh, he did say that. And that was, I think, again. And my parents used to be pretty into the QAnon movement, and they're not anymore. So there's definitely some progress there. But I don't know if that'll be something that'll happen in a couple of years. I feel like for my parents to get it out, it'll be, a few more years.
Yeah, and ultimately that's okay because it's going to take time. It took me an entire year to come to the realization that I was wrong, and I wrote a public apology, which everyone could find at my site, leavingmaga.org, where I acknowledged my mistake, and I had to come to terms with the fact that pretty much everything I believed was wrong. and I had spent years believing it. I had spent years writing about my beliefs, only to realize that my support for Trump and MAGA was truly a grave mistake, one of the gravest mistakes of my life. So you are having an impact. I think it's important that you get some credit here, because even if it's happening slower than we want, you're still having a positive influence. I want to close with something and ask you here: why are you speaking out publicly? What was it about your offering a testimonial for the world to hear? Why was this important for you to do this?
I've said this to some other groups before, but I sometimes feel that people feel that they're fighting a hopeless battle against people who are entrenched in MAGA. And I wanted to share to say that no, it's not hopeless. If people hadn't done that things, if people hadn't pushed back on it, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't be free as I am now. I wouldn't be able to come to face the fact that I am different from my parents and do not believe the same things as them. If those people had not been doing those things, who knows how many more people would have never left? Who knows how many kids around my age who were stuck in similar situations would have never been able to find their way out. That's why, because I feel, and it's something I've experienced, is that sometimes it feels that the battle doesn't have any meaning, but it does. Every time you try, you could potentially be saving someone's life. It's important, and that's something I don't see a lot of people talk about.
It's really selfless, Tor, on your part to do this. It shows a lot of intrepidity on your part. One of the reasons it's so hard to leave MAGA is because it is a community. For me, it was a second family. And you not only left a community, but you also, they're always going to be your family, but you had also not just pressure from MAGA friends, but also MAGA family. And that makes it, you went through something even I didn't go through, because I didn't have family who were in MAGA. My MAGA second family became friends and close ones. And it's why it was so hard for me to leave. And it took that year, was because of that community. So you did it with a community and with your family. So that just shows so much bravery on your part. I'm really moved by your story. I promise you that viewers, what you're saying is going to resonate with them. Where can people find you? Are you on socials?
Um,
Where can we connect with you for our viewers out there?
I currently don't have too many socials, but I do have a blue sky at Red That Cat. It's simply, Red That Cat. Sorry, I'm just finding it here real quick just to make sure I've got it correct, because I mostly post art there. But if you ever wanted to come talk to me about anything really political, um I'd always be open for that.
Can you spell that for us? Your blue sky account?
Um, REDTHATC.
Okay, great. So you can find Tora there. We're with Tora Owen today, who's joined us, giving her testimonial of leaving MAGA. Tora, I just want to thank you so much for doing this. I know that it's difficult to recount this story. Thank you so much for being with us here on behalf of all of our viewers.
Yeah, again, it's something I've dealt with a while, and I felt that it was important to say something because I want people to know that there is hope.
Well,
A
you're
lot of
bringing it for us. You're bringing it along with all those. Welcome to our MAGA community. I always like to close a video by saying I'm rich, I left MAGA. I'd like to do that, and if you're willing to affirm that here. I'm rich, and I left MAGA.
I'm Tora Owen, and I left MAGA.
Thank you, Tora. Appreciate you being here with us. Hey, everybody, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe. Have you left MAGA, or do you know anyone who's left, or do you have a friend or a relative who's in MAGA and you'd like to talk and tell your story? Make sure you reach out to us at leavingmaga.org. As always, really appreciate you watching. Until next time, thanks so much.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.